Level Mot, General Assistant. You scrape ice off a breakfast tray. Your fingers have gone numb inside the gloves. Outside, the thermometer reads -40. Inside, 200 people are waiting for lunch. This is McMurdo Station, Antarctica. In summer, it holds up to 1,200 people. Tonight, in the dead of winter, it holds fewer than 200. You are one of them. No commercial flights come here. No roads lead here. Whatever you need for the next 5 months, it already arrived, or it didn't. Nobody told you this job would start with dishes. You have a master's degree. It doesn't matter here. The dish pit doesn't care what you know. It only cares what you can carry. Before the kitchen, before the cold, there was the ice. 2 days out on the sea ice, alone with an instructor, learning how to survive a whiteout. They call it Happy Camper. Every person who comes to this station takes it. The scientist with 3 published papers, the plumber. You. Nobody skips it. Out here, rank doesn't keep you warm. You remember the flags. Long lines of them, planted in the snow, marking the only safe path between buildings. You follow them to the dorm every night. You follow them to the bathroom, 50 feet away, because 50 feet is far enough to disappear in a whiteout. And people have. Contracts like yours are reported to start around $25,000 for the season. You will not see your family for 5 months. You will not choose when you leave. The last flight already left. The next one is 4 months out, weather permitting. Out here, even that phrase, weather permitting, means something different than it does at home. Nobody knows your name outside this kitchen, but every person here, the doctor, the scientist, the man who signs the paperwork upstairs, eats what you serve them. 3 times a day, without exception, for the rest of the season. That is the only power you have. It isn't much, but it's real. Before anyone gets a seat at this table, scientist or dishwasher, everyone had to survive 2 days alone on the ice first. Level high, fuels operator. You took that same course 2 winters ago. Now you walk the flag line before dawn, checking that the wind hasn't buried the markers overnight. Somewhere under your boots, a fuel line runs from the tank farm to every generator keeping this place alive. At -50, diesel turns sluggish, almost solid. Your job is to keep it moving, to keep the pumps warm enough that they don't seize overnight. If they seize, the heat stops. If the heat stops, everything stops. The labs, the kitchen, the dorms, all of it, at the same time. Nobody photographs this part. There's no press release for a man checking valves in the dark at 4 in the morning. But without you, the scientists 2 buildings over lose their labs in about 6 hours. Without you, the whole hierarchy above you stops mattering. Something else follows you here, and it doesn't care about your job title. Researchers studying the psychology of these stations call it winter over syndrome. Around the station, people just call it the big eye. The sleeplessness that comes from months of either endless light or endless dark. Studies on crews at similarly isolated stations describe it peaking around the middle of winter. Low mood, disrupted sleep, a kind of mental fog that doesn't lift until the sun does. It doesn't spare the janitor to save itself for the scientist. By the 3rd month of winter, it reaches almost everyone, more or less equally. You've started talking to yourself a little. So has everyone else. Nobody mentions it out loud. It's just understood. Out here, the mind erodes at roughly the same rate for the man who checks the valves and the man with the doctorate down the hall. Rank buys you a better office. It does not buy you a better winter. The station survives because of hands like these. Upstairs, in the galley, someone else is keeping it fed, and keeping it sane in a different way entirely. Level Ba, Galley Chef. You stir a pot of soup built to feed 200 people. Outside the one small window, the wind gauge reads 150 kilometers an hour. Steam fogs the glass before you can see the storm clearly. Across the continent, at the South Pole Station, a cook like you feeds a summer crew of roughly 150 people. Come winter, that number drops to somewhere around 50. Fewer mouths, same job, same isolation, just quieter and somehow louder in your own head. You learned early what the cold does to food. Leave a sandwich outside for a few minutes and it freezes solid, all the way through, edges first. Out on the ice, people carry chocolate bars instead, one of the only things that survives the walk between buildings without turning into a rock. Some researchers here describe the winter as a kind of psychological hibernation. Meals are one of the only rituals that mark time at all, when the sun doesn't rise for months and the calendar stops meaning much. A holiday dinner, a birthday cake made from whatever's left in the dry stores. You didn't sign up to be anyone's therapist. You became one anyway, 3 times a day. Supply flights are supposed to arrive on schedule. Often they don't. Weather turns a plane around mid-flight and sends it back to where it started. People here call it a boomerang. When that happens, the kitchen absorbs it quietly. Nobody upstairs apologizes for the weather. You just make do with what's already in the freezer. Nobody puts a chef's name on a research paper. But morale on this station rises and falls with what's on the tray at 6 o'clock. A bad week in the kitchen becomes a bad week everywhere. People notice. They just don't say why. What keeps 200 people fed also keeps the station standing emotionally. What keeps it standing physically, against the ice itself, is a different kind of hand entirely. Level Born, skilled tradesperson. You lie under a generator at minus 50 degrees. Your breath freezes on your collar before it clears your chin. The wrench keeps slipping because your fingers won't fully close. This is the job nobody romanticizes. But it's the job the whole station depends on, in a way the brochures rarely mention. Consider what happened at Haley Research Station, a British base built on a floating ice shelf. The first structure was buried and crushed by the moving ice within a decade. So they built a second one. It was crushed, too. Then a third. Then a fourth, each one redesigned to survive a little longer than the last. Each time it was people like you, electricians, mechanics, structural engineers, who kept the lights on until the walls gave out, and who built the next version after that, in the same cold, on the same ice that had already destroyed 3 attempts before it. That same station, still standing, is where British scientists first identified the hole in the ozone layer in Momsimcham Tamilam, a discovery that reshaped environmental policy worldwide. Nobody remembers that it was only possible because a crew of tradespeople kept rebuilding a home for the instruments 4 separate times on ice that never stopped moving. Reported pay for senior tradespeople here can run higher than what many postdoctoral researchers earn. An odd inversion in a place built entirely around science. Out here, a working generator is worth more than a peer-reviewed paper, at least until the generator is the only thing standing between 200 people and the cold outside. The station survives because of hands like these, not because of the names that end up on the research papers. But someone still has to walk out onto the ice to protect those names, and to protect the instruments the names are attached to. Level Num, field assistant. You clip your harness to the flag line before stepping onto the blue ice. Behind you, 2 scientists follow in your footprints exactly, 1 boot print at a time. Your eyes are already scanning for the one thing that matters. A hairline crack in the snow that wasn't there last season. This is the job with no room for a bad day. In Motnin Chincham Nammichin, a British meteorologist named Dennis Tink Bell was surveying above Ecology Glacier when the snow beneath him gave way. He fell roughly 100 feet into a hidden crevasse. His field partner tried to pull him back up using a team of dogs. Partway up, his belt snapped. He disappeared back into the ice. His remains were not found for 66 years. They were finally recovered in Hainin Khongcham Haimilam, brought home to a family that had spent 6 decades not knowing exactly where he was. You don't think about that story every day, but it's there, underneath everything, the way the crevasses are there underneath the snow you're walking on right now. It's why you check the same stretch of ice twice. It's why the rope never gets shorter than it should. Getting this job took years before you ever set foot on the ice. Mountaineering certifications, crevasse rescue drills, practiced over and over on terrain that only pretends to be stable. None of that training comes with a title anyone outside this continent would recognize. Ask most people what a field assistant does, and they assume you carry equipment. What you actually carry is the decision of where it's safe to walk, made new every single day, with no one else qualified to check your work. You are the reason the science gets done safely. Your name will not be on the paper it produces. Records tend to remember the discovery. They rarely remember the rope, or the person holding the other end of it. Level SAO, graduate student. You check an instrument at 3 in the morning under a sky that hasn't gone properly dark in weeks. This is the lowest formal rank in the actual research hierarchy, below the postdocs, below the professors, below almost everyone whose name appears on the eventual paper. You do most of the physical field work, the data collection, the equipment checks, the frozen fingers at 3 a.m. It's commonly reported across academic fields that graduate researchers often end up last on the author list, even when they did the bulk of the labor. A quiet imbalance nobody officially defends, and nobody quite abolishes either. In Mutmin Chincham by Moisao, a researcher named Dr. Donna Oliver became the first woman to winter over completely alone at an Antarctic station. Her diaries stayed sealed in storage for nearly 50 years before her own daughter helped her finally tell the story. 50 years of silence about a single winter. That's how long it can take for this kind of isolation to even become visible to anyone else. You tell yourself your situation is temporary. Everyone here tells themselves that. The instrument you're checking tonight isn't yours. Neither is the funding, the publication, or the recognition waiting at the end of it. What's yours is the 3 a.m. wake-up, the cold walk to the site, the log entry nobody reads unless something breaks. In a few years, if this goes well, you'll be the one whose name finally moves up the list. And someone else will be standing here instead of you, checking the same instrument, telling themselves the same thing. What you don't know yet is that the person whose name sits above yours on the grant is already discovering her own version of powerlessness. She has the funding, she has the title. What she doesn't have, tonight, is a working snowmobile. And no amount of authority can make one appear faster. Level 7. Principal Investigator. You radio the station office, requesting a snowmobile for tomorrow's fieldwork. Then you wait. Your research grant funds telescopes and instruments worth millions of dollars. Equipment built to catch particles that have been traveling since before the Earth existed, or to listen for the faint gravitational ripple of 2 black holes colliding a billion years ago. None of that funding buys you a faster answer from logistics. This station is carved into specialized zones to protect the science itself. A clean air sector, kept free of vehicle exhaust for atmospheric readings, and a dark sector, kept free of light and radio interference for astronomy and particle physics. The zoning exists because your data is only as good as the silence engineered around it. Silence that other people have to build and maintain on your behalf year after year, whether or not your experiment ever produces a result worth publishing. You spent a decade earning the credentials that put your name on this grant. None of those credentials outrank a broken snowmobile, a fuel shortage, or a superior who decides your fieldwork isn't the priority this week. You hold the title. You hold the funding. What you do not hold is the ability to move faster than the logistics office allows, or faster than the ice permits, or faster than the weather agrees to. Every request you make must first survive a filter you don't control. That filter has a name, an office, and 3 levels above you, one final signature. Level TAM, Station Doctor. You close the supply cabinet and mentally rehearse a surgery you have never actually performed. You are the only physician within roughly 1,000 miles in any direction. Tonight, that fact feels heavier than usual. Before anyone is approved to winter over at a station like this, they're required to pass a formal psychological screening, a behavioral health assessment mandated under the U.S. Antarctic program. It exists because the isolation itself can become a medical emergency long before any accident does. You administered several of those assessments yourself, back when the sun still rose and set on a normal schedule. Outside, the wind has picked up past 150 kilometers an hour. Somewhere out there, the flag line you walked yesterday is already disappearing under drift. One flag at a time, swallowed by a wall of white that erases the horizon completely. If something goes wrong tonight, a burst appendix, a bad fall, a heart that won't behave, there is no emergency flight. There won't be one for months. You have already run through the list in your head more than once. What you can treat here, what you can only stabilize, what you would have to talk someone through over a satellite line while a doctor thousands of miles away tells you what to do with your own hands. Every piece of equipment in this room, every protocol you memorized, exists to buy time against a single fact. Help is not coming faster because someone with authority wants it to. The only authority that actually matters in that moment isn't a title. It's a weather report. And the person who signs off on every rank at this station, from yours down to the dishwashers, is about to learn the exact same lesson in a much bigger way. Level Chin, Winter Site Manager. You manage the daily grind of this place. Schedules, supplies, small disputes between exhausted people who haven't seen the sun in weeks. You report upward to someone with a bigger office and a heavier signature. Command in isolation has a history, and it isn't a clean one. In 1840, an American naval officer named Charles Wilkes led one of the first expeditions to chart the Antarctic coastline. A genuine achievement, one that mapped over 1,000 miles of coast that no one had recorded before. His name is still on the map today. An entire stretch of the continent is called Wilkes Land. But historians also describe him as a difficult, even toxic commander, a man whose erratic behavior damaged morale, who marginalized his own officers and sent some of them home in disgrace before the expedition was even finished. Isolation didn't invent that kind of leadership failure. It just had nowhere to hide it, and no one else to dilute it among. More than a century later, the modern station system was built almost overnight. During the International Geophysical Year of Mingxincham the United States put up 7 bases across the continent within a single season. McMurdo, the South Pole Station, and 5 others all at once, all commanded by people figuring out this exact same job for the first time. One early memoir from a scientist at a remote inland base among them described 9 civilians and 30 Navy men crammed together for a dark winter, and the kind of personal conflict that isolation alone can manufacture out of nothing. No enemy required. You'd like to think modern structure prevents that now. The assessments, the training, the oversight, the psychologists who screen every winter over candidate before they're ever allowed to stay. Mostly, it does. But structure doesn't survive the winter unsupervised. Someone still has to hold the line, alone, in a building where the nearest backup is a radio call away at best. What's about to become clear is exactly how much that person can and can't actually control. Level Miro, Station Manager. You sit with a satellite phone that hasn't rung with good news in days. On your desk is a logistics form. You sign it anyway because that's the job, even though it means nothing until the sky allows a single plane to land. You hold the highest authority on this station. Legally, administratively, on paper, you are the final signature above everyone. The doctor, the scientist, the mechanic, the dishwasher. Every rank below you answers, eventually, to you. Here is what your authority cannot do. It cannot end the winter early. For roughly 4 months, no aircraft can safely land or take off here, regardless of what happens on the ground. A supply flight can turn back mid-air and boomerang home rather than risk a landing. The same word the kitchen staff use, the same helplessness, just further up the chain now. Not for you, not for anyone. And here is the deeper irony, the one that outranks even you. In Molnian-Chincham Namichin, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, agreeing that no country would ever claim sovereignty over this continent, that no weapons or military bases would be built here, that no nuclear testing would ever happen on this ice, and that whatever governing happened would happen by consensus. Today, 29 nations still govern it together under that same agreement, and every major decision requires all 29 to agree. Antarctica is the only continent on Earth that no single country has ever owned. There is no ultimate owner of this place. There never has been. The person holding the most authority on this ice has one power he does not have. For 4 months of winter, he cannot get a single person off this continent, no matter what happens. Command outranks everyone here, except the sky. And the sky always wins. Closing mirror. The dishwasher below counts the weeks until the first flight reopens the sky. The station manager, at the top of the org chart, counts the exact same weeks, because his authority means nothing until that same sky opens. Different rank, same countdown. Out past the last building, a line of flags still marks the only safe way forward. It was planted by someone, on someone else's orders, to lead everyone through weather no rank can control. Tonight, in the wind, you can no longer see where it ends. The cycle continues. A man scrapes ice off a breakfast tray in a kitchen where it's -40 outside. The last flight left months ago. This is a research station in Antarctica, the only continent no country has ever owned. 29 nations have to agree before anything happens here. Everyone below answers to someone above them, but by the end, you'll understand something strange. The person with the most power on this ice also has the least control over